Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and to our final lesson in our seminar on Christian philosophy. We're going to take a look at our final lesson in Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. We have begun with consciousness and sense certainty, and now we conclude with absolute knowing. The final lesson is absolute knowing, 479 to 491, paragraphs 788 to 806. And I do have the paragraph numbers referenced throughout this lesson. But this will conclude the final triad of art, religion, and philosophy. Hegel ends with how do we make spirit concrete? And so he ends his phenomenology with art, religion, and philosophy. And philosophy is absolute knowing. So he concludes with absolute knowing. So I'm excited because it doesn't matter how many times I go through the Phenomenology by Hegel. It's a tremendous work. It's a very, very powerful. There have been volumes and volumes and volumes of manuscripts written on Hegel's phenomenology. He has impacted every field of study. So we're going to take a look at this final lesson on absolute knowing. Let's go to block 1, and we're going to look at the logic in block 1. We're going to look at essence in block 2, and we're going to look at spirit in block 3. Let's go to block 1 and take a look at absolute knowing passes through the 3 phases of absolute logic, absolute essence, and absolute spirit. Absolute logic, paragraph 788. It's the logic of picture thinking presents absolute spirit, which has spiritual being for the self. This is discovered in the self's meditative communion within the self. So what's religion present to us? Picture thinking. So picture thinking is presented to us in religion, and then we meditate, we commune, we meditate and reflect on the absolute spirit as presented in picture thinking. Now, absolute essence, 789. The universal content is recognized by passing through sense certainty to spiritual perception, noesis. We recognize the movement of the universal, which unfolds as a self-unfolding. The universal, the notion of the true, it unfolds on its own. Spirit is living spirit, and it unfolds under its own self-actualizing power. Spirit is always moving from dunamis, potential, to energia, actual, all the time. It's a process of coming to be, and it develops in various moments of shaped consciousness, says Hegel. Remember, his phenomenology is all about the development of spiritual self-consciousness. Now we look at absolute spirit. We've looked at absolute logic. We've looked at absolute essence, and now block 1, note 3. Now we look at absolute spirit. Okay. We transition from noesis to understanding, and then to sunaidese, self-consciousness, spiritual self-consciousness. And it is a recognition that within all of existence there is a movement of inner being. It's an intrinsic movement of universal being in all of existence. In humanity, in history, in all of existence, there is an intrinsic movement of inner being. And we reach that recognition and it must be formulated, it must be constructed, and then it must be posited. And Hegel says we posit it as moral self-consciousness. So it becomes ethics. It becomes Christian ethics. And at the same time, the concept of conscience evolves, and it becomes phronesis, the imprinting of the spiritual mind set. So with this awareness of the movement of inner being that is intrinsically present in all of existence, we realize it's also intrinsically and immanent within all individual selves. And therefore, we imprint and begin the inauguration of our own conscience. And then in the Greek, that is phronesis, imprinting of a spiritual mind set. Imprinting of a spiritual mind set. We have transitioned from picture thinking, and now we have transitioned to conceptual thinking. When we get into this stage of absolute knowing, it's all about discovering the concepts that make up the kingdom, and then participating in the unfolding of these concepts through all their phases, with all their intrinsic truth, and then through the discovery of their intrinsic inner being, we develop relationships between these discovered concepts, and then we put together an ontological world view, a structure of existence. And we formulate that in our heart and in our mind. Okay, the key block for this lesson is block 2. And what this is, it's examining the category of absolute essence. And I've got 4 steps. You could title this The 4 Steps of Absolute Knowing. And if you notice, at each one of those sub-steps in block 2, look at the end of the title for each one. The steps are presentation, then reflection, then construction, and then movement. Movement as ongoing movement of self-consciousness. In other words, it doesn't end. Then there's the ongoing movement of self-consciousness. Presentation, reflection, construction, and ongoing self-movement of mind, self-consciousness. So block 2, note 1, absolute essence as notion being presented. Religion has given us the absolute content of essence as an objective picture and as a subjective notion of essence. Next, the self must act on this presentation. So, the first step is presentation. Now, block 2, note 2, paragraph 797, absolute essence as the self's act of reflection. The notion requires the self to form the content of essence. Make a note of that, underline that. The self is required to form the content of essence. For all of existence, subjective existence and objective existence. And this will create knowledge as substance, says Hegel. This will create knowledge as substance. Now, step 3, block 2, note 3, absolute essence as true content of spirit. Now we look at construction. Now we look at ontological construction, the structuring of all existence. Spirit knows itself through our shaping of spirit. How do we do that? By constructing a comprehensive ontological shape of our worldview. Hegel's all about worldview. It's all about our construction of a comprehensive ontological, remember ontology is shape of existence, a comprehensive ontological shape of our worldview. And it's provided by conceptual thinking and by sign formation. And that's key. Concepts can become stagnant. They can become rigid. Our worldview is supposed to be made up of signs. Signs are dynamic, living. They point beyond themselves to something greater. That's why we talk about the sign of the cross, the sign of resurrection. They aren't just stagnant concepts. Those are dynamic, living, spiritual signs. And we're supposed to be involved in conceptual thinking that moves on to sign formation in order to put together our ontological worldview. Now, Block 2, Note 4, paragraph 799, absolute essence is the movement of self-consciousness, where the I of the self is, and this is interesting, it is mediated but then superseded universality. In other words, Hegel says it's our task. This is how the ontological worldview gets constructed. It's the task of the believer. It's participation. It is our task. But how can that be? How are we the ones that construct a universal worldview? We're not divine characters. We're not divine subjects. How can we grasp the structure of the world, the structure of existence, and say that sounds very arrogant to say that we can do that. And so Hegel says, well, we do participate by providing that mediation, but then we supersede, we negate. Remember, he's all about dialectic. But then we negate our determinate self, we negate our finite side, and then we preserve the universal side of spirit. So we do construct our worldview, and then we immediately negate any evidence of our own finitude or individuality in order to preserve, look at note 4C, in order to preserve the universality of spirit in and for itself. That's how construction includes the step of dialectic, of Aufheben, negation coupled with preservation. We negate the finite side, we negate the finite dimension of our worldview construction in order to unveil and refine and affirm and preserve universality of spirit. Now, Block 2, Note 4D. We are now ready for absolute spirit. We're ready for Block 3. We looked at absolute logic in Block 1. Block 1 gave us absolute logic. Block 2 gave us absolute essence, and it gave us the 4 steps to reaching absolute knowing. Put a big circle around Block 2. That's the key to the lesson. 4 steps to absolute knowing. But now we move on to Block 3, absolute spirit inaugurates spiritual history. Hegel's all about history. He emphasizes history a great deal in his Christian philosophy. Block 3, 1, paragraph 803, absolute spirit as history making. Through positing, we form our self-knowledge, and the torpid self, the slumbering self, is awakened to its task of positing. The posited world is recognized as the self's property. Paragraph 804, absolute spirit as the self's movement within the spiritual substance. The movement of the self within substance as the spiritual uprising of existence. I love the way that Hegel says that. Now we're talking about the spiritual uprising of existence. That intrinsic inner being is rising up. It's the immanent movement of the notion of the true. What is posited moves in its own self, and then it returns to unity. Then it returns to absolute unity between subject and object. Now we're ready. Block 3, note 3, paragraph 805. Absolute spirit as the conclusive shaping of spirit. What's the work that we're doing here? We're shaping spirit into an ontological representation of divine universality. An ontological representation of divine universality. The separation between subject and object is overcome. In the unity of self-knowledge, spirit wins its content of the notion of the true. Spirit wins its content of the universal notion. I have been tremendously blessed to do this. This completes our seminar on Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, a seminar that everybody says is impossible. There are many that go, I will never read Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. There are people that say it's the most poorly written philosophy ever. There are people that absolutely despise Hegel. And then on the other side, there are people who elevate and admire Hegel as the greatest philosopher who ever lived. I am of that category. I admire Hegel. I admire his Christian philosophy. And yes, this Phenomenology of Spirit is very, very difficult. And the way to get the most out of it is not through my 10 lessons, 10 lectures. The best way to do it is to get an actual physical seminar together. I recommend 12 people in a room, quiet room, seated around a conference table. 12 people who are enthusiastically interested in studying Hegel, who will do the readings for each of the lessons, who will do the readings. And then what you do is you get together, and the seminar is all discussion. You reference, someone will reference a paragraph because everybody uses the same Miller translation. They reference a paragraph, you read it in the seminar setting, and then you talk about it for 15, 30, 45 minutes. And these 10 lessons that I've done, they're just guideposts. They're just guideposts that the seminar can use to set their bearings. But the beauty of a seminar is the closed, quiet setting. And to be honest, our church has what, 5,000 members? I don't know. It's a huge membership. And I don't know if we could even find 12 adults interested in philosophy. When I went to Dallas Baptist University with seeking my degree in religion, other students that were there for the same major, we all had to take a minimum number of philosophy classes to get the degree, and everyone said, I'm going to do the minimum and I'm never going to study philosophy again. I'm going to do the minimum and just get past it. I hate it. And you had to do 3 semesters of philosophy. Me, I did the 3 required semesters, and then I volunteered to take logic at another university, and I took American philosophy at Yale through, I guess they called it a Tager system, but it wasn't like the internet today. You're talking 1975. I'm an old dude. This is 1975. But in back of the library, they had 3 of those huge satellite dishes out in the yard behind the library. And then they had like the early version of what we call today the internet. But in 1975, it wasn't internet. They called it Tager, like a closed circuit TV or something. But I actually took American philosophy at Yale. I had to get approved by the faculty to do that. But everybody goes, you're volunteering to take more philosophy? You're crazy. But I loved it. I loved that class. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot about Edgar Sheffield Brightman and his philosophy of personalism. So to me, I really enjoyed that. And I represented our university well. I did pretty good in that class. So I represented Dallas Baptist, and I remember my philosophy professor wanted to make sure you get in there and show them that a Southern Baptist can stand our own. We can stand on our own and do well. I said, I will, I promise I will. I really enjoyed it though, but that's why philosophy and Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit is rough reading. It is. I mean, it really is. But like I said before in earlier lessons, you just have to read him very, very slowly. He can be comprehended. But you can't just read through his writing in a casual way. You've got to read very, very slowly and take notes and outline as you go if you want to really comprehend what he's doing. And that's what I do. I read, I don't know, this is what, my 5th time through his phenomenology, I guess. But this time was the greatest. Because this time, at the very beginning, I was determined to teach it. So I put pressure on myself, like, if you're going to teach it, you got to get this right. You've got to really go slow. And so, if you notice, the sessions we didn't cover more than 12 pages at a time. Very limited reading, but that would still take me forever to do to get these lessons done. A lot of hours to put this together, but I'm so thankful that I got to do this. It's very, very powerful, and I love Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. And I never thought that in 2024 I'd be teaching a seminar on Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. I never thought that would be happening. But I had to go through it for my master's way back in 1983. But this time, I really got a lot out of it. I really enjoyed it. Very, very powerful. Well, my friends, that's going to wrap up our seminar on Christian philosophy. That will conclude our seminar on Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. First published in 1807.